Hi everybody, this is Steven again. I decided to give you an additional video about the Asgardian Marvel Legends characters, and this time I will just cover the ladies who belong to all sorts of different waves that they came in. So I will start with one of my personal favorites, and that would be Valkyrie. Valkyrie in the Thor comics had a long history, and she will be showing up in the Thor Ragnarok movie, part 3, that's coming out in November this year. Now, of course, she will not look anything like this. The movie director opted out for a completely different look altogether. So she will not be blonde or white for that matter or anything like that. But anyway, that's just artistic freedom and a different interpretation of Valkyrie, what we will see in the movie. And I expect the movie to still be good, because I'm quite impressed with the trailer when I saw it. And Valkyrie has always held interest to me because I read the classic Thor comics when I was a kid, rather than, I'm not that familiar with the newer ones these days. But in the old ones, Valkyries did play a significant role in serving Odin by what was their purpose is to bring fallen warriors, Vikings who fell in an honorable battle, to bring them, if they're worthy, based on their heroics and all that sort of thing. If they're worthy, they would be securing their place in Valhalla, which is kind of like a heaven for warriors in the Viking mythology. Now, this is a relatively updated look for Valkyrie, and her classic look is slightly different, and I have a figure of that one too. But let's start with her. She came in the wave of Hasbro Marvel Legends Build-A-Figure of Hulkbuster Iron Man, which is quite a large figure, which was also seen in Avengers movie part 2, and same figure was released, meaning of the Hulkbuster Iron Man was also released in the Toy Biz Marvel Legends way back in the Famous Riders wave. And she was one of the characters, as I mentioned, in the Hulkbuster Iron Man Build-A-Figure wave, this particular version, and she came only, aside from the piece for the Hulkbuster Iron Man, she also came with her sword. And the name of her sword is a Shadow Fang. I believe it's called that way. For one reason, it has some particular powers to it, and it's a very well done sword, I would say. A little bit thin for my taste, but it's still good. Still well molded. And she can hold that sword in either of her hands. And she's made to be quite tall compared to her classic version. She is quite tall, and I would say almost the size of She-Hulk, for that matter, so she towers over other female characters. She has a great deal of articulation, as usual, as to be expected. However, she's unable to do much of a split, except about this much. She can move her legs, she cannot move them backward, and going forward is also not working on mine, maybe because the plastic is stuck or something of that sort. But she does have movement in her legs, articulation in her legs, especially near the hip here. She can rotate her leg left to right, and then there is a bending in the knees, and there is an ankle pivot at the bottom, and she can move her ankle forward and backward. She also has movement in her torso, in her upper torso, from left to right. There is no waist movement. She can move her head also slightly to the left and a bit to the right. And she has movement in her wrists and in the elbows, and there is movement in the shoulders, and there is also bicep swivel. She came only with the sword, as I said, and this is her more most present look, the way she looks. Now I will show you also, side by side, her classic version is to the right here. And you can tell the very first difference is the size. The one on the left, the present one, is much taller. The one on the right is actually quite shorter, and they do not wear the same type of clothes as well. So let's switch now to the classic version. The classic version was also made by Hasbro, but a couple of years back, around 2010, roughly. And she was released with Ed McGuinness-based Hulk, the way he was imagined by that particular artist. So they were released as Toys R Us exclusives. In this particular pack, you had the Valkyrie and the Ed McGuinness Hulk. In another 2-pack, you had Warpath from X-Men and Deadpool. And in the third 2-pack, and all 3 2-packs were actually exclusive to Toys R Us. In the third one, you had Black Widow with Winter Soldier. Now, in each case except for the Valkyrie and Hulk, there was no extra heads to switch, but there was no extra heads as well with the Deadpool and the Warpath, but there was color variations for the Deadpool and color variants for the Deadpool and Warpath. And then in the third wave, there was some extra heads for the Black Widow with short and long hair, and with the Winter Soldier, there was also short and long hair variants. And this particular wave was one of the little bit more difficult ones, especially because it contained Valkyrie, who never saw a release as a figure prior to that moment. At least in 6-inch she wasn't. And she came with 2 weapons. She came with the long spear and her sword Shadowfang, the magic sword. She also came with a cape, rubber plastic cape, a hard rubber cape, and she's wearing her classic costume from the old comics. There is also a sword sheet on her right side where the Shadowfang can be stored inside it. She's wearing her classic armor that she wore in the comics from the 1970s, 1980s period. And this is how I remember her from the comics that I read as a child. She had quite a bit of importance in those particular stories about Thor in those days. And it's a pity that she was not released with her horse, because she had a horse, as most Valkyries do, a horse with the wings, which pretty much resembles in looks the horse of She-Ra, and she and her other Valkyries would ride into a fight or even into distant battlefields on Earth to collect all those men who were worthy in fighting and who were worthy warriors. So she's a good figure. The only strange thing is that she's much smaller than her present version size-wise. But both figures actually look pretty good, so I'm happy with them, even though there is quite a bit of a drastic difference in size itself. But they still look good, so I don't have any major complaints about that, really. I would consider the size difference just a minor complaint on my part. Now, this is Enchantress. She is an evil goddess who uses I guess the power of love to achieve whatever she wants to get out of people. And she's been targeting Thor for a long time to fall in love with her, and when he doesn't, she then uses magic and makes alliance with Loki to cause Thor trouble at any cost, because she's very jealous type and she dislikes the fact that Thor likes Lady Sif, which is his love interest in Asgard. Lady Sif is a woman warrior, has been such and portrayed that way, while Enchantress is portrayed more of as a jealous type and sort of a selfish type, because she wants Thor all to herself, but she did not succeed in those attempts so far. Sometimes she comes close but loses in the end, and this is her classic look, the way she looks in the comics and in some of the Marvel cartoons. She came with these detachable magic spell circles that many times were reused for many other characters in Hasbro, and she came in a wave of Build-A-Figure Dormammu that contained mostly magical characters, especially Doctor Strange, due to the fact that the Doctor Strange movie came out not that long ago. So she was one of the characters to be released in that wave, because she deals with magic, as you can tell. She has articulation, again, as most of the females do, in the legs and in the ankles and in the knees, shoulders, elbows and wrists. However, there is no bicep swivel in this case, and there is no movement in the waist except in the upper torso only. The head cannot move due to the fact that she has sculpted hair that impedes any serious movement left to right or even up and down, which is fine. I think she still came out rather well, and her color of her costume is pretty much portrayed properly. She still did not make any appearances in the Thor movies so far. Executioner, her sidekick, who is also her bodyguard, he will make an appearance in part 3 of Thor, but she did not so far. She did make a significant appearance in the Avengers, the Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and she was fighting the Avengers a great deal, and Thor as well, and challenging him every step of the way, and she showed up also in the storyline animated movie of Thor vs. Hulk in Asgard, where she formed an alliance with Loki to overtake Hulk's mind. Her hands are molded in such a way that she releases magic from them at a given notice, and aside from that, she looks like a pretty good figure, and I am very happy with the way she came out. Now the only question is, when will they give us Executioner to complete the duel, because she needs the bodyguard to be present as well. Hopefully one of these days we'll see him in an action figure form. So anyway, that's the story about the remaining females from Asgard that I wanted to cover. So I hope you guys enjoyed this particular video as much as I did, and that I gave you at least a bit of information on the characters and their background. So there will be more coverage on the Asgardians, specifically this time mostly about the different versions of Thor and some of the Thor's enemies. And of course, also coverage on Odin, the father of Thor. But more about all of these in another video. Thanks for watching, you guys, and I'll catch you again later. Bye.